All right. Welcome, E-Town. This is the fourth episode of season 1 of the Remote Learning Rundown. I'm Scott Bramley, and I am here with two distinguished guests who are going to answer some of the questions that you submitted in advance. So I appreciate everybody who responded. We had 21 responses with several questions and topics to discuss. So thank you to everybody who put some time and energy into that as we're thinking about wrapping up the 2019-2020 school year and heading into summer school and then into the fall. So my guests tonight are Pete Bavis and David Chan, and they're going to introduce themselves really quickly, and then we'll get started.
Hi, folks. Pete Bavis. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and I miss everyone. And I just, that's really how I feel about this. I desperately want to get back to what was once normal. But I thank everybody for the remarkable work they've done this quarter, transitioning on a dime, literally, to remote learning, balancing their families, balancing life in general, caring for their students and their loved ones in this time of just upheaval socially and emotionally. So with that in mind, I just want to say hi. I can't see you, but you can see me right now. So I guess that's kind of, I'll take it.
All right, hi everyone. My name is David Chan. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology, and I'm proud to be a part of the season finale. Is that what we're calling it, Scott? The season finale of Remote Learning Rundown, episode 4. So we'll have to end on a cliffhanger to make sure we get the fans back for season 2. Announce the drop date on Netflix soon. But yeah, super proud of everyone's effort. It's been a crazy, very interesting 2 months now since we started, and proud of the work that our school, our team, our staff, everyone, and our students have all done during these times. So thank you for that, and looking forward to answering some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. And I have a few final thoughts a la 90s talk show television to wrap up the season as well. So thank you for that nod there, David. So several questions were submitted, and I tried to categorize them and see how many we could answer on air together. And obviously there's some knowns and a lot of unknowns. And one of the things that everybody's challenged with this time of year with the pandemic and everything that's happening is the uncertainty. And so we'll try to address as much as we can, and anybody who submitted a question and attached a name to it will get a direct response on anything we couldn't answer. And then for those questions that were anonymously submitted, we'll try to do some posting on the shared website of the professional learning website with the rundown where it's posted as a FAQ. So, all right, so closing out 2019-2020. So we did have one viewer who did ask if there were any plans whenever we do go back to allow for some closure, some goodbyes to classes from this semester in this school year. And so I don't know if either one of you could take that and kind of talk about what you know about that.
Sure. I mean, it's I've been in meetings. We've been planning, for a bunch of different contingencies, and that's clearly one of them. Is to have some closure after the fact, I guess you would say, for our students and faculty. There are a lot of unknowns, but that's one of the things we are planning for. Should that time arrive where we could do that, it'd be great.
Wonderful. And another question came up around kind of closing out this school year, access back to the building. And so, we certainly had some designated times for faculty and staff to clear out their classrooms and sign up, and the operations and the safety department have been fantastic in supporting that. But if we're thinking ahead to the fall, and we might have to be in a situation with remote learning again, are there some opportunities before the end of this year for faculty, staff to get back into the building?
So I'm going to take that question to mean, if we're on remote learning in the fall, will our teachers have access to the building? We've been discussing that. Of course, we'd have to look at where we are in terms of our reopening plan from the state. But should all those things align? Yeah, it's a very real possibility that we would allow teachers in the building to do demos and things like that from their classrooms. It'll be different in the fall than it is now. So that's one of the things we're talking through, and just making sure that we're providing a safe environment for which to do that. Yeah, that's where we are. And that's exciting, actually, because if we could open up the classrooms for teachers to do demos in culinary, autos, science labs, I think it's a much more exciting online experience for our kids if we're remote in the fall.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And some of those conversations have, talked about some material, picking up materials and stuff like that. So I think we're trying to be as flexible as we can and think through what can happen while staying in accordance with the stay-at-home order and the governor's disaster proclamation and IDPH and CDC guidelines. So we have a lot of factors that we're dealing with, but I think everyone is thinking about this topic and trying to figure out how we can do it safely. So I appreciate that, Pete.
And I would just add, it extends to students as well. There's some questions, I believe, in the stock and just, a variety of places that, what about students coming in? What about incoming freshmen? So we're definitely talking about material pickup and try to, again, make it a streamlined situation for our incoming freshmen. And that includes things like textbooks and Chromebooks and all that stuff. So for the students right now, though, and for summer school students, just for technology's sake, we have been operating on a entrance 2 kind of swap, so we can still extend that offer and for tech support, including internet access through mobile hotspots. So definitely continue to refer students that need that access and need that technology support to our team. So that's through the Chrome Zone or Chrome support at ETHS202.org.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, David. I think a good reminder. I know we only have about a week or so left here for the 2019-2020 school year, but then also with summer school, that we have been able to support students who may be having some technology device needs through that Chrome support email address and then through the door to pick up and drop off. So thank you to you and the team in IIT for being able to support that. All right, so we're going to move on to summer school really briefly. There was one question around summer school, which is basically, hey, are we shifting expectations? We're closing up COVID-19 pandemic time Q4, and we're going to transition into summer school soon. So I don't know. I know both Pete and David have been a part of conversations planning for remote learning in summer school. That announcement was made a couple weeks ago that we would be remote learning for summer school and that in-person instruction would be suspended for the summer. So either one of you can jump in and kind of just talk through maybe some highlights or some thoughts about summer school expectations. I know maybe a little bit of a cliffhanger here as well, that there might be a document coming out soon. So
sure.
Pete?
Yeah, I've been working with Bill Farmer and a team, and he's been, getting teacher input on these expectations. We really see summer school as an opportunity to hit the reset button. We will no longer, summer school is different than what we were just under in terms of ISB guidelines. Remember, we were essentially told that students could only get incompletes this semester. That's not going to be the case for summer school. We're going to go full on grading. Grading is back. I'm sure a lot of people like to hear that. We're also going to have a schedule we're running for e-learning, a daily sort of schedule for kids that'll be published out. We'll also have expectations around, synchronous and asynchronous learning, guidelines on that. It allows us to hit reset in terms of how we build community in the online environment, how we grade, how we assess. And what we're going to do, that'll certainly inform, should we be on remote learning in the fall, that'll help serve as sort of a testing ground or a proving ground for lots of those things. So we're excited, to offer summer school in this fashion, because we think it's going to reflect more of what we would expect in a true remote learning setting, where grades count and all those things.
Yeah, and I would just add, our team for the technology side, we will have staff available to support teachers both prior to summer school. We're going to have our ChromeCamp event coming up. A lot of that will be geared and targeted towards what's it like to plan a course for remote learning from the very beginning, including how to build community, to during summer school, obviously getting students the access they need and to teachers the support they need. And really starting to rethink, as Pete said, when then designing the course down to the units, the chapters, the assignments, how does that look from the big picture and starting from the beginning? A lot of us, we have to do, or teachers, you have to do it in the middle of the year, 3/4 of the way through, you knew your students were ready. So those two big things are going to be different when you start a new class, whether it's summer or in the fall. So we want to make sure we work with you on getting the best foot forward starting out.
David just brought up really important issue that emerged in the questions that were submitted around, templates for unit planning and online course planning. And I know I've seen several articles kind of being thrown out there, blogs, people are posting about this. I even took an opportunity to talk a little bit about this when we first transitioned from Active God Days into the remote learning. But do you have any sense on, are there some templates online? Is there part of ChromeCamp going to include some of that? As you were talking about with designing courses for the summer, but then also for the fall?
Yeah, I think ChromeCamp will be one of the main, the first showcases for a lot of the teachers. We have 10 groups of teachers that are going to kind of share what they've been doing during these past 2 months. We're going to have an opening panel from students as well that is going to share kind of their experiences, moderated by Dr. Campbell. And so I think, hearing that and reflecting and internalizing a lot of what other teachers have been doing, whether you've read about other teachers or just hearing from our own staff. And then we will also certainly work with teachers on giving some suggestions on how to organize your class, how to set up your Google Classroom, how to kind of work with Zoom sessions, some suggestions for building that community. Those will also be sessions in ChromeCamp. They'll also be part of some additional programming opportunities during the summer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to transition off for summer school and several questions around scenarios and options for the fall. And so, obviously people are thinking about what does this look like, and I just want to name a couple of things related to this before we go into the questions. When you watch the news, when you look online, when you talk to folks, there's a lot of energy around, when will this end? Where are we at? When is the other side of this and what will that look like? And I think the reality of the situation is anybody who kind of purports to know those answers it's a little suspect, to be able to have definity in any of those responses. And so, but I do think it's helpful as we talk about what ifs, that people know we're thinking about these things, we're looking for information from them. You mentioned the student panel about their lived experience this term. I think that's fantastic to hear the wonderful things that our faculty and staff are doing and how students are receiving that and engaging with it. And so I think, we don't know what will happen. We can't predict what's going to happen. We have some thoughts based on what the governor has issued and what the Illinois Department of Public Health has issued and the CDC. But there's a lot of unknowns, and the local context, what we can do at ETHS, given some of the values that we have on certain experiences and the restrictions we might have due to size and programming. There's no one size fits all, and we really don't know what it is. But I think a lot of people are seeing the writing on the wall, so to speak, that there may be a scenario where we have to incorporate some form of remote learning in the fall. And so with that said, we're going to talk through some of those scenarios and talk through some of the expectations around that and what we're thinking and how things are being planned. But just know that, for everybody who's watching, there's no decisions have been made on that yet. And we'll take our guidance as we need to from the state and from the health professionals. But a couple people did ask, what is the likelihood of e-learning in the fall, remote learning in the fall? Is there some availability of a hybrid? What might it look when we do return? How will we account for safety when we return? And so, from either one of you, if there's any perspective on some of that thinking and planning and some of the challenges that you've been able to identify in your roles.
Sure, I'll start. The goal, of course, is to reopen successfully, whether that's remotely, fully in person, or a hybrid, something in between, right? The easiest to prepare for in many respects is, remote learning, because we can really concretize what that is, what worked, what the best practices are, and we can plan accordingly. The next one would be the full opening, right? Full regular opening. And the reason I put that second is because we have to also acknowledge the stress and that would come with that, right? The emotional piece would be significant. The third option is some sort of hybrid of the two. That's the one where, which would require all sorts of restrictions, social distancing and all of that. There are guidelines on that. We're looking at all of these options. And let's be clear, they really won't be options in the fall. We'll be dictated to as to what we really have to do. From my perspective, I'm going all in on remote learning, because whether it's a hybrid model or a fully in-person model, should COVID come back at some point, we would want to be adequately prepared to transition smoothly with the expectations established and everything. So we're planning for that. But I've been in various different meetings. We're preparing for all of those scenarios, everything down to like, if we are remote learning or hybrid learning, like we talked about earlier, we would, have pickups for materials for kids scheduled, whether those were fine arts materials, CTE materials, science lab materials. So we're thinking about all of those logistics. We're thinking about, what would a hybrid block schedule look like if we had to bring 1,000 kids in the building at a time, or whatever that is. So, we're preparing for the unknown, but we're preparing for the knowns of the unknown as well. So, we know that even if we do come back fully, that like I said, there's a strong possibility that we may have to close down for a period of time should there be another outbreak or an increase in incidences of COVID. And we're preparing for all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add other than one thought I've had with the past 2 months and working with teachers and our teams working with teachers is just, we're seeing a lot of good teaching come out, online, or at least new applications, new ways to teach, and new things to try that I think will still apply in a face-to-face classroom, right? So building these online discussion arenas, rethinking some of the assignments that are done, planning for that remote learning in the fall. And if we happen to come back, full in person, I still believe that a lot of the good that's come out of the past 2 months can still be applied and will be applied in teaching and when returned. So everything from, again, guest speakers via Zoom or virtual, to engaging all students online, to better organization of content and materials. Hopefully we'll see a lot of that. I know we will. We'll see a lot of that continue going forward. So planning for that can only help, I'd say.
Yeah, I think what I've been noticing a lot to that point is just some revisiting of systems and structures, right? And how you think about teaching and learning, and that's really opening up some possibilities, albeit challenging to manage in the moment right now. But as you're talking about transforming our practice moving forward, and how many times do we have students that aren't able to access our in-person instruction for any number of reasons, even without this remote learning and COVID situation, and how we might be able to transform how they stay connected to their learning, even from a distance. And so really appreciate that perspective. I know it's a difficult perspective to have right now. And our colleagues have been really trying to work hard to think about how there's a new normal on the other side of this. So yeah, I know we don't have a lot of answers on the scenarios, but I think it is important to just, like I said, let people know we are thinking about it, and are appreciative of the thoughts and the suggestions and the ideas that come through. And anybody who submitted those into the form for tonight, those will be passed along as well. So, but I think it's inevitable that we have to plan. Like, we know how to do school in person. We've been doing it for a while. We really need to think about if we are remote, and what is that going to look like. And so there were lots of questions about that. Right now, we have one vision of what remote learning is, and it's based on what Pete talked about, being thrust into a scenario without a lot of information, and then having some parameters employed by the state board, to hold harmless and to make sure that we weren't negatively impacting any child based on circumstances outside of their control. And so that's where we found ourselves this spring. But now, as we look forward to the fall, we still have some considerations for equity, access to technology, the multitude of scenarios that families find themselves in, factors outside of their controls, the effects of this time, this spring and the pandemic. And so those considerations don't go away, but I think when we look to the fall, we might be able to have some other pieces in place that feel a little more connected to what people have been yearning for, like a little more structure, some different expectations, the ability to be a little clearer with communicating some of those things because we have some more knowns at that time, hopefully. And so those were some of the pieces that came up. And so I'm going to throw a couple questions at you. And David mentioned one of these is community building, and that came up a lot in the responses around remote learning. And so are there some recommendations or suggested ways to try to build community at the beginning of the year if you can't physically be present with your students?
Yeah, so this is one that I've been thinking a lot about, and I've taught online for over a decade now. I teach chemistry, and so I don't see my students ever face to face. So I have to build some sort of community with my students. That's a little different because I get students each month, but so it's even harder. It's more of a challenge. But so what I've been recommending and talking with teachers about is, using that live session and even having a couple of them in those early moments and starting out maybe with the whole group, large class, but then thinking about making a smaller group live session so that you can really dig deeper with students and get to know them a little more personal, have them kind of come out of their shell a little bit, because it'll be hard to do that, I think, in a full class of 30, 35, whatnot. So you need the smaller group interactions, and then building some asynchronous or non-live opportunities for students to connect. Still be with either text. So I did a whole course on online discussion formats. So just a text-based web form kind of interface, but it could also be with audio or visual, right? So using something like Flipgrid to record just a brief icebreaker introduction, do a 2 truths and a lie. Any kind of icebreaker you probably would have done in person, you can pretty much do, or many of them you can do with the Flipgrid type thing. And then students can, again, all participate. They can do it whenever they want at their own pace and time. They could practice their video. It doesn't have to be, Johnny on the spot, do it right then and there. They can say what they want when they want. They can retake it. Unlike what we're doing right now, this is all live. We're not going to edit this. So they have that luxury, right, to do something like that. So building those opportunities from the very beginning, connecting with families, using Jabber, using the phone, and video calls to really make sure that every student does feel included. And I did see that in some of the forums and the questions about focusing on participation and focusing on, getting students and being almost just more in tune sometimes. I feel like as an online teacher, sometimes I have to overcompensate. I do more, in fact, to try to get to know my students than I might have done in the face-to-face classroom, because I know it's going to be harder. So I feel like we're seeing some of that. Again, not easy. I totally recognize that, but hopefully you can make that a key focus, make it very clear that that's a point of emphasis from the very beginning, and work to make sure you get to know your students from the beginning, especially because it's different going into the fall or summer school, like I said earlier, because you don't know them, or you won't have had that experience of knowing them prior to it.
David, I can't stress it enough how important that's going to be in the fall. It's what keeps me up at night is that we can't, we don't want to jump into content straight away. We want to take the time, maybe twice as much time, to build that community because it is that significant. And I think of our freshmen coming in and how important that is for kids who've never set foot in here in an academic setting, to have their first experience online, and they're anxious and they're nervous, and they're coming off of 6 months of quarantine potentially. I can't underscore that enough, because that'll lay the foundation for acknowledge, care, tell. It'll lay the foundation for making those connections count. It'll serve the well-being of the students, and I have to imagine that as the teacher in that environment, it's going to feed your soul as well.
Yeah, and I've seen some examples. We're starting to see some preview of the resources being shared for ChromeCamp. I mean, one teacher has what's called a Bitmoji classroom, and it's like, it was a beautiful just slide deck. So instead, you can really think about, how can I jazz up? How can I make my materials even more vibrant? Even something like just adding music to your Zoom meetings, just as people walk in, as students are coming in. There's anything you can do, I feel, to kind of add your personality and share your, kind of make it a more dynamic place, and kind of get students excited about it, because our students going to be excited about going to yet another, Zoom meeting or Zoom to Zoom. So we've got to think about ways to kind of get them pique their interest, to be excited, to know that they're going to learn about this new person, you, the teacher. They're going to learn more about their classmates because they are dying for that, right? They're yearning for that experience. So the more we can build that in from the beginning and all throughout the year, hopefully, we can make that experience happen. And the other thing I was thinking about is just roles. We talk about building community, having roles for students, even, have students moderate the chat, have students take notes during a Zoom session, have students be involved with the active part of the learning, besides just, the content recipients. So thinking about how to add those opportunities to your classes can also be a great way to build community from the beginning.
Thank you both. Those are great points. And I think, the values that we place on student agency, the values we place on having inquiry-rich environments, spaces and places where students are seen and heard and valued, although more challenging to transform online, are still, if they're core, can continue to be what leads you to the designs you have. So, how do you allow students to also contribute to the creation of your content, and not just be consumers, like you said, David? It really resonated. And I know that we're going to see some examples of that on the 29th in ChromeCamp as people have been working through those pieces. So I'm excited about that. A couple other things around this. One thing that came up was grading. Obviously, Pete mentioned this early on, that there was some restrictions and some decisions made from the state board to guide grading for this time, but we don't know what that's going to look like in the fall. There might be some guidelines that come out from the state, but are there any preliminary thoughts that you can share, Pete, around like grading expectations and how that's going to work moving forward?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the return of grading that we've done in the past, with a couple of caveats. I think one of the things, and if we are remote, and even if we're not, we just have to be mindful of the types of assessments we're giving, how we're assessing kids. I think is one of the things we're learning in this quarter. What works, what doesn't work, and the ability to transfer that to in person, I think, is huge. I think the idea. I think we've all learned a little bit about credit recovery and grade recovery, and I would like to see that flexibility extended into the next semester. I think, having some flexibility and grace, because I guarantee you one thing. Here's the one thing I'll guarantee you. Next year will not be a normal year. We need to get that just out of the way right off the bat. Next year, you think this quarter was strange? Next year is going to be different. Okay? We have the opportunity to make it different in a very positive way. And I think, by learning from the things that we've experienced this quarter, obviously in a perfect world, and what I would like to see is, A, B, C, D, F grading scale back in place, A93, let's go, let's roll. But along with that, I would like to see opportunities for retakes. I would like to see opportunities for credit recovery throughout the course. Because one of the things I noticed is that when we shifted to the incomplete this quarter, this semester really, there was a pause where my colleagues and our teachers were saying to me, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? Does that mean that I have to figure out, like, if it isn't incomplete, what that makeup work looks like and how that's going to progress? It shifted sort of that assessment burden from being on the student to more of a shared experience. And I think, as uncomfortable as that was, I think there's some real learning to happen for a lot of folks, where, that ability to, like, be flexible around deadlines, be flexible around grades and assessments. I would love to see that inform our philosophy going forward. I think that's huge. And I'm not talking about the technical aspect, I'm talking about the belief aspect. So I would like to see that transfer to the fall and going forward. I just think that's in line with grading for equity. That's in line with the kind of practices that we read about and we aspire to be. So there is a silver lining here in terms of that.
Thank you so much, Pete. We're going to shift really quickly to some technology questions that came up, David, and some PD questions. And so one of the questions that emerged was around additional subscriptions, additional pieces of software, other applications. Some people mention things that have been working for them, but then, there's no shortage of vendor solicitation during the pandemic right now. So I know my inbox gets flooded, usually under the guise of some kind of like super informative opportunity to learn about something. And then it's like, and then here's the product, which isn't always bad. But one question specifically was like, is there a way to get a list of what's available, and is that something we can post on the website? And then if there's any thoughts about other opportunities, and if somebody had an idea for something that they wanted to try to use in the classroom, what's the process that they would use to try to either get that purchased or use the free version, or kind of vet it to see if it's really worthwhile?
Yeah, so we have a couple places. One of the most prominent places under the staff website and under online tools. There's generally a lot of the main tools that we use at ETHS is listed there. On our eTown e-learning website, which is actually available if you're using Chrome as a bookmark. If you're signed into Chrome, there's a bookmark in a folder called ETHS that will have our website linked there. We will also look to, I know one of the suggestions was to maybe add this website to the online tools page. So we'll definitely look at making it more prominent there as well. But on that page when we first started, we actually created a whole page dedicated to specific applications that we recommended. And, some of your favorites are on there that many of you know by now, Zoom, Screencastify, Khan Academy, stuff like that, Edpuzzle. So those will be available there, along with some intro starter guides and links to more support. Now, as Scott mentioned, there are a ton of vendors, there are a ton of new products, especially now too, that especially early on, they're like, hey, use our product for free through the end of June or July at the time. And we suspect many will extend that a little bit, but maybe some will not. So, we were mindful of not wanting to jump too quickly to just say, sign up for all these different tools. We really actually went the opposite. We focused on the ones we either already had, or if it filled a gap, Zoom filled a gap. We needed something for live video conferencing that we didn't have readily available yet. So we pursued that, and we went and went ahead and recommended that for staff to use with students. So there will be a handful of other examples like that. The process generally is that we recommend certainly using the free version first. And if you can, and a lot of times, I'd say in the majority of times, that's generally good enough for what's needed. But if you find that there's a need for the additional or paid features of a freemium, as we call them, product, that you explore the trial, you definitely reach out to someone from our team to then begin taking a look at pricing and availability. And we generally go from that initial free trial to perhaps, if available, and most times there are, a pilot. So we have a small group of teachers using it, and then seeing if it would go a larger scale if needed. So we're definitely open to it. We have for the accounts we do have that are paid, we have a paid account request form through our online PD site or through our EdTech Learning site. So you can look for that and to request these materials or request access. You can also email us too, and we can point you to that form. But yeah, so we will work on another way to make that more visible. All the subscriptions are available on our website, but for now, online tools and our eTown e-learning website has them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And anybody who knows me knows that I don't really do social media much, but there's definitely been a lot of memes out there around the blank Google Doc submitted as work completion and being checked in. And so one of the questions did ask specifically if there's any way to block that in Google Classroom. And I don't think there is, but I thought I'd ask it anyway.
Sure. I mean, so the answer, no, the short is no. There's the other answer is you can submit feedback to Google Classroom. That algorithm probably can be done pretty easily, right? If they don't see any content in there, then restrict the student from submitting it. So it's certainly from an engineering side of things, I think it could be doable. But they have to know that, they have to get that feedback. It's not something in our control. And then I just would say, when you're grading, there is that grading view panel in Google Classroom where you can kind of go from student to student. So that should, back when Google Classroom first started, for those teachers know, you have to open each doc in a new tab, and that's gone now. So it should be a little quicker. That being said, and this came up, I know, in another question, online grading, it's tough. I definitely recognize it, especially if you were used to definitely having things more on paper and using, your pen to kind of grade things or doing it in hand. So as Pete mentioned a little bit, rethinking some assignments, rethinking how we assess what needs to be assessed, what can be done automatically, I guess. There are tools, Google Quizzes, Kia can grade things automatically for like multiple choice questions, and also allow students, and this is what I do in my online class, for some of the more conceptual based questions to retake, right? Scramble up the answer choices, have them take a quiz that can get graded for them automatically, can give them feedback automatically. You can design what feedback gets sent to them based on what answer choices they've done. So summer is a great time to really look at that and think about how you can make your life easier going forward by putting in a little work on the front end. I get it, or on the back end, and setting those kinds of things up so that you can focus your grading time on maybe more qualitative responses, on more feedback during essay writing and process-driven documents. And then, that's what I do. Again, when I teach online, I focus on those kinds of things, the projects. I spend more time grading and assessing those things that will give me a little more joy probably than grading a stoichiometry calculation question when a machine can do that for me.
Excellent. Thank you, David. I think we'll close with the questions with just one final thing. We all know that there's ChromeCamp happening on May 29th. And so some people asked for maybe a quick preview of what that might look like. You've alluded to some of the offerings throughout the episode tonight, but you want to give a quick kind of preview on the agenda and maybe any thoughts about post May 29th? Is there anything in the works, archived learning, or, less, not asynchronous learning that might be available?
For sure. So we're really excited. On May 29th, we've put together a great schedule. We're going to kick it off with an opening, probably involving Drs. Campbell and Dr. Witherspoon. We are also going to have a student panel organized by Dr. Campbell to ask, again, students what their experience has been, to share that what worked, what hasn't worked, what their suggestions would be for teachers going into summer and fall. We are going to then have 4 different concurrent session times, and then 4 concurrent sessions going on during those times. So there's going to be plenty to choose from for teachers. And again, the sessions are going to be run by teachers and as well as by instructional technology team, the EdTech team. So Mina, Melanie, Jessica, and myself. We are also going to have a non-classroom strand, so to speak. So a session during each of those times dedicated towards non-classroom staff. So focusing on some of the topics that they may be interested in, including, everything from email and Jabber to Google Drive and Classroom as well. So looking at that, we're excited about that. We're going to have, of course, the dance party, I think, is still going to happen at noon. So we're going to have break for that, make sure everyone get their steps and groove on. And then we'd like to close it with some sort of, celebration. We're thinking about having a virtual scavenger hunt, kind of like a goose chase, if you've been to a Connections conference in the past. So having some fun built in throughout the day, maybe some swag, close out that day and really the school year, I guess, with that. And then in the summer, we're excited about offering some opportunities, both asynchronously. We're going to have our online PD courses available all throughout the summer. We have 6 of those available now. That's running on Zoom and Screencastify, and bringing discussions online, bringing your teaching online that Scott did, as well as a couple of modules that will really be designed to help teachers get their courses ready for the fall. And so we'll have more information about that coming up soon, but those will be released during the summer, kind of hopefully earlier and later, and we'll have opportunities for teachers to engage in that work in preparation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. Well, first, I want to thank you both for being here tonight and for everything you've been doing. And this came up several times, and I don't think anybody can say it enough. David, to you and Mina and Melanie and Jessica, the instructional technology team has just been hands down fantastic and phenomenal and responsive and forward thinking, and just, it's been amazing to see. And we all have colleagues who work in other school districts, and we see things that are happening, and, you know, not to disparage what anybody else is doing, but, you know, your team has just taken this on and championed the efforts. And I think every teacher I have spoken to throughout the past 2.5 months has said nothing but how supported they felt. And not just teachers, you know, all the staff at ETHS who have been navigating working from home and trying to figure out, you know, some of those issues that arise. So your team, but then also everybody in the informational technology side of the department has just been phenomenal in helping everybody. And we are very fortunate to have you and your team and the whole department here at ETHS supporting us through this, because a lot of schools are really struggling with a lot of these pieces. And your forethought and the work that your team did in advance just for traditional e-learning, and now as we've transitioned, has just been it's been really a fortunate situation for all of us. So thank you so much for all that you've done and everything that's been happening.
Oh, thank you. And again, you know, the staff has been great. As you mentioned, we were preparing for this for just a snow day, and really we've been preparing for this. You know, this is what our job is about, right? Helping teachers really teach with more technology, but just improve teaching and learning. And it's unfortunate it had to come to us, but you know, we've been you know, blessed to kind of have this opportunity to really work with teachers, and we built the relationships and rapport. So it's been you know, it's been a great experience and a tiring one, but definitely a great experience to share with our staff.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, David. My final thought, just I appreciate everybody and the positive compliments and feedback about the remote learning rundown. Is something I wanted to try during this time to challenge myself and try to stay connected to the community. As Pete said early on, I'm missing seeing everybody. Somebody who literally spent an average of 8 periods in a classroom, working with students, seeing students and teachers every day, or talking about teaching and learning every day. To be removed from that has been definitely a challenge, but this has been one way to try to stay connected, and people have been positively receiving it. So I'm going to try to commit to doing it for season 2, probably not weekly, but to some degree in the fall, especially if we're doing remote learning. So thank you both, and thank you to everybody for watching. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.